Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever in the world you are joining us from. I am Tamsin Murphy, Head of Content here at Nutrition Network, and today we're diving deep into one of the most misunderstood, yet most powerful areas of health, especially for women. We're talking about women's hormones, metabolism, and the female rhythmic blueprint, because us women, we're not just small men, as all the research leading up to this point in time might have had everyone believe. We have got a very cyclical nature, not just from month to month, but over the lifespan. And so we're thrilled to be joined today by Dr. Daphne Lyell, an integrative GP or medical doctor, for those of you who don't work with the term GP, and a homeopath whose work has become foundational in helping women understand their bodies. As I said, not as small men, but as complex, cyclical, beautifully designed beings with unique metabolic needs at every life stage. So Dr. Lyell's two-part amazing lecture forms part of one of our most recent trainings at Nutrition Network, our menopause training. But very excitingly, in honor of Black Friday, we have created a bundle for women's health. And this bundle includes the training that Dr. Lyell is on. In other words, the menopause and perimenopause training, but it also includes the training that preceded that, our women's health training, which is what this bundle's named after, as well as our amazing training on stress and resilience, which is really, really important. And I do think that we're going to dive into the role that stress plays within women's health and hormonal and sexual health with Dr. Lyell today. At least I'm hoping that we're going to do that, because I think women have some unique stresses and some unique experiences in life that really affects their health, and certain aspects that I'm really hoping to dive into thyroid in particular today as well. So there's lots and lots. Please stay tuned. If you want this bundle of those 3 amazing courses from Nutrition Network, they normally go for $960, but on Black Friday, they're going to go for basically a third off, which is $622. So sign up. You can already sign up now. And if you want the standalone women's health course for Black Friday, because it's an older training, we're actually giving up to 70% off for that course. So please contact support@nutrition-network.org if you want to find out any more information about any of these. But let's get back to business. This is the moment to empower yourself and your patients and the women in your life with Dr. Daphne Lyell. She is going to dive in a little bit into, kind of give us a sneak peek into the amazing 2-part huge lecture packed of information about the full female journey from puberty all the way through menopause and beyond, through a metabolic, low-carb, holistic, cycle-aware lens. Welcome, Dr. Lyell. So wonderful to have you.
Thanks so much, Tamsin. It's really lovely to be here. I'm excited to dive into these topics. They're big ones, so let's see if we can do them justice today.
Yeah, in such a short time, it's difficult, which is why people must sign up for the training. But let's do our best. Let's do our best with a little bit of time. Okay, on your marks.
Yeah.
All right. So let's start with your lecture, shall we? So you start your lecture out saying that dysglycemia, for those non-medical practitioners out there, dysregulation of glucose levels in women is skyrocketing across puberty, reproductive years, and pregnancy. Why? What is going on with women's glucose levels, and how is this related to metabolic risk?
Yeah, thank you. It's a really pertinent question, because we're sitting in a time where, looking at our South African stats, we're sitting with something along the lines of 69% of women overweight and 40% of women obese. I mean, if you actually just stop and think of that, that is really significant. We've got a real problem. What our women are consuming is not serving their bodies. We're sitting
and Dr.
with
Lyell,
a level of...
Just to
Yes,
interrupt you there, my understanding is that
yes,
in men it's a lot lower. I mean, this is particularly
yes,
pronounced in women. I can't remember what the stat was in
yes,
men,
yes.
off the top of my head, but I think it was like closer to 50% in men, if I remember correctly.
I also have I've
70,
got a 48% in my mind. Yeah.
oh, well, there we
Yeah.
go.
So
Crazy.
I think it's a really foundational misunderstanding of the female physiology, because we're such cyclical beings, and these hormones monthly play an important role in our insulin sensitivity. We do not understand how to eat, and I think let's look at the factors that play a role, because there's some very clear ones. When we start looking at the female hormonal cycle, let's start with just really diving into the menstrual cycle. And I always say menstrual cycle with ovulation as the main event. We've got a bleed, then we've got the follicular phase where we're building up to ovulation. Then we have ovulation if you're healthy and well. And then after ovulation, you have your luteal phase that then lasts for the whole cycle, roughly on average 28 days, but we have a normal range between 21 to about 35 days, which is normal. And throughout the cycle, the estrogen and the progesterone levels change. And estrogen is one of our key determinants of insulin sensitivity. So in that initial follicular phase, we have estrogen that slowly starts building as a result of stimulation of the ovaries. And as that estrogen builds, our insulin sensitivity in that first half of the cycle is actually really great. Then we have ovulation, and after ovulation, we have progesterone. And we become slightly more insulin resistant in that time, when we're in that luteal phase. And but we need more carbs. So it's a very interesting place that we sit in, that we need different levels of carbohydrates over the two parts of the cycle. We can go really low carb in the first half of the cycle, but then we really need the carbs in the second half of the cycle. We look at if we start looking at the development of this hormonal cycle in women, we've got your puberty, which naturally it's called physiologic insulin resistance in puberty. So it's basically every time we have these big, I want to say, threshold moments of hormonal changes, we start seeing they're almost a test for how well your metabolic health is. So we look at puberty, we look at pregnancy, we look at menopause, and it's every time that we have these fluctuations in the hormones, it's a test for how metabolically resilient you are. So then when we're looking at puberty, we can see that we've got an physiological insulin resistance. So it means that we're more prone to storing fat in that time, because the body is getting ready to get us for it's priming us for reproduction. And when we are from childhood, if we don't have the right metabolic input, that's the first place that we start seeing abnormalities. And then things like polycystic ovarian syndrome presents. And in South Africa, 1 in 5 women have polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, PCOS is a whole different topic. I don't want to go into that, but that's really significant. And it is said that it's up to 40% of cases of infertility as a result of polycystic ovarian syndrome. One of the types, there's 4 types, but one of the types of them, and the most common one, is as a result of metabolic problem. It's a metabolic problem. It's an insulin resistant problem as a result of too much carbs. We basically just taking in too much carb for the female physiology. Then we start looking at pregnancy. In pregnancy, we're seeing an increased amount of gestational diabetes, which is also a marker of metabolic disease. And it's not often, the education around that is not often there, explaining to women that clearly your diet isn't right for what you're needing. Your needs are different from what you're receiving. And this is a red flag that can determine type 2 diabetes in your future. So you need to really work at getting that level of carbohydrates right. And people like Lily Nichols in this field is doing incredible work around this and educating women around this. And then in that the female physiology is also really very sensitive to the sleep disruption, high levels of stress, endocrine disruptors. So there's all these external things that play a role, and it's such a not toxic soup, but it's such a cluster of things that happen in that time, postpartum especially. Now, if we've gone from the pregnancy and gestational diabetes, in that postpartum time, the sleep disruption, stress, the second child, the third child, like it's just so much, women still wanting to keep hold the fort in terms of work. So that really stresses the female physiology. And then we get to a place where we're in perimenopause and we start seeing muscle loss. And muscle is a metabolic determiner. Like muscle is such an important support in terms of using the glucose that's in the bloodstream, and muscle is a determinant of long-term metabolic health. So we get to this perimenopausal time, and it's just, if we've missed the signals in the body from and from pregnancy, now we're sitting in a place in perimenopause, and fortunately the conversations around that is definitely more online, and you can find so much more information, but we're sitting in these places where the hormones change, and insulin is one of our key determinants of glucose sensitivity in the whole body. It's not just in the muscle or in the gut or in the cells, it's in the brain. And insulin, the use of glucose in the brain as a result of lowering insulin, sit with women in perimenopause with brain fog and memory problems, and we can see those change if they start changing their diet and they lean more into a lower carb diet and they get their bodies more metabolically flexible, and we start using ketones as fuel. We see the changes, so I think the last thing that really must be mentioned is the environmental load. I touched on it, but we're sitting in a time where there are so many endocrine disrupting chemicals, from our perfumes that we use, the fragrances, fragrances in everything. We start looking at the diffusers that we use with all the synthetic fragrances, our cleaning products, our laundry products, our perfumes that we spray straight onto the thyroid, and I'm really passionate about that, and seeing how can we detoxify our homes and get these chemicals that mimic estrogen in the body out of our systems, because they're one of the things that actually add stress to the body and worsen the insulin response. So
wow,
yeah, I've seen, yeah, it's a lot, we can actually continue talking about this for this hour.
Well, actually, I have all these other questions, but I want to actually go back over what you've said, because I've been writing notes as we've been going, and I feel like we need to dive into some of these in a bit more detail. I have lots of questions about what you've already covered, so I'm going to forget about my rest of my questions for now and just focus on these ones. And I also want to invite the audience. This is your chance as well. If you have any questions for Dr. Lyell around the topic of metabolic health in women, hormones across the life cycle for women, this is really, really your chance to ask those questions. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to start asking some of my questions before we move on to the next topic. Firstly, you mentioned all of these time points across the life cycle that women are uniquely challenged by insulin resistance, right? And we know that insulin resistance is the underlying or ill metabolic health is the underlying condition that kills most of the world, right? Most of the world's dying of cardiovascular disease, cancer, other chronic diseases of lifestyle, and these are metabolic diseases. So there is an aspect of insulin resistance or glucose dysregulation happening within these conditions, which leads me to wonder if women are so uniquely bombarded by all these life changes, pregnancy and menopause, and all these things that have potential negative impacts on insulin resistance, or, as you say, Dr. Lyell, at the very least, they challenge us. They present a metabolic challenge to see how metabolically healthy we are and whether we can handle these challenges. Why then do women seem to live so much longer than men? I was just wondering that.
That's a very interesting question. I think
Are women healthier than men despite this? Or not? Is there anything protective in women? I know this is a bit of a curveball, but I was just thinking, like, because we are exposed to all these things.
I'm not entirely sure of the answer, to be honest. I just know that there's it feels to me like the female body, we have access to this incredible power of creation. And I think we mustn't forget that. It's like there's a line from John O'Donoghue that says the female body is the only way into the universe. And so there's a sense of when I look at the cyclical nature, there's the sense of building and growing and dying. It almost like our body encompasses the seasons, and there's a way that we can detoxify some of these things. And I think there's a level of and it might be controversial to speak about this in this context, but if we look at, for instance, the GAPS protocol that I use in the practice quite a lot. And for those people that don't know it, find GAPS, which is a woman called Natasha Campbell McBride that wrote this protocol really about resetting the body and resetting the gut and the gut microbiome. One of her very firm, we're actually able to detoxify through our menstrual blood. And I think there's something that happens in this. We have a way of releasing some of these toxins. And this is also why I really encourage women before conception to do the work to help their bodies detoxify from heavy metals, because we're exposed to heavy metals all the time through the water we drink and the air and through our food. So really working with detoxifying the body. Otherwise, we will detoxify some of that into our children. So we use, in a way, the placenta, even though it filters some of that out, we do deposit some of the heavy metals into our children, and especially our firstborn. So it feels like there's a way the body is able to detoxify and get rid of. And you think of something like hemochromatosis, like men suffer from that much more because they're not able to get rid of their red blood cells. So it's a way of detoxifying iron. And I think the way I understand the minerals, and this is also a big topic, but the way I understand the minerals is that iron is quite it gets oxidized and it drives inflammation. And with women, even though we see a lot of iron deficiency, and I think the root of that is more copper and mineral imbalances, but we are able to get rid of some of this iron and some of the oxidizing and pro-inflammatory things in our body. So we're able to cleanse out every month. We can recycle, and we can so there's an inherent blueprint of regeneration within the female physiology.
That is fascinating. Let's dive in. Can we dive into those toxins in a bit more detail? Because you mentioned just now as well, before this, you said we need to be detoxifying our homes. You mentioned perfumes and other like cleaning products. And now you're talking about actually these toxins not only are deleterious to our health, but potentially to our baby or our children's health. So what does your detoxification protocol look like? What is your standard? I don't know. What would your standard advice be for everybody when it comes to avoiding toxins?
Yeah. The one that I work with is that healthy bodies can detoxify. It's a process that the body does in any case, whether you're aware of it or not. But a healthy body can detoxify. And it's about creating an environment where we're looking at what are we exposed to. So the exposome is one of my favorite words. Exposome is everything that you're exposed to from intrauterine up to where you are right now. And we look at things, your personal exposome. So what are you applying on your body? What are you eating? What are you drinking? What are you smelling? Where are you spending your time? Are you walking in nature? Are you in your house mostly? Are you on screens a lot? What does your look like? And what are you using in terms of cleaning products? What are you using as body products? Everything we apply on the body gets into the body. When we put it through our mouth, we have the wonderful first pass effect in the liver, where it actually gets rid of some of the toxins before it allows it into the body. But whatever we apply to the skin gets into the bloodstream. It's so important to remember this, that when I say this, I think about our kids. What are you applying to your babies? What are you allowing them to walk on in your house? What are the cleaning products? Our feet are super absorbent. The skin of the feet is super absorbent. So what are your kids crawling and walking on? And what are you putting on their skin? And then we look at what can we not control. So what is being sprayed on our crops? What is airplane and car pollution? Like all these things that we are exposed to. Is there a smoker in your house or not? And when we start having this conversation, it can feel really overwhelming because it feels like there's so much we can't control. So I always invite people to come to your home and create a sanctuary with the things that you can control. And I invite people to start reading labels, to start learning about this, and to start identifying what's actually in their things that they wash their plates with, because there's a residue on that with every meal that you eat. So really just getting very granular and slowly start looking at what is it that we are exposing ourselves to every day, like this everyday exposures. And that's the thing that becomes cumulative, right? And the cumulative good is also as good. So cumulatively not exposing or cumulatively taking it out, and removing and mitigating and diluting. The solution to pollution is dilution. So we want to have less of this in our bodies and in our lives. And we're in a time where we have an unprecedented level of preservatives, of herbicides, of pesticides. Like we've never been exposed to this much toxin, like external toxins. And then let's not even get into the conversation of glyphosate now, but the things that's sprayed on our food, that we take in without knowing that we're taking it in, because it's just part of our food production. I saw a graph probably about 3 years ago. I was at a lecture and they had a graph showing the amount of glyphosate sprayed soya in our bread that we buy over the counter. Woolly Chickers, Pick and Pay. Like I was like, why is there soy in bread? Besides the amount of glyphosate. But it's one of those things that it's just built in, because it makes, when we start looking at highly processed foods, it's just part and parcel of it, because we need things to be preserved. So what do I teach my patients and clients? I say to them, let's start going back to the kitchen. If you look at a box and you can't recreate what's in that because of all that's on the label, put it down. Can live well for a year and 2 years is not living food. We want to feed our living bodies living food. So we want to go back to eating the whole animal. We want to go back to eating whole foods and whole nutrient dense foods, and eating another kind of key cornerstone in my practice is I work with plants as cleansers and healers, and I work with animals as builders and restorers. So when it depends, when we're little, we obviously want a little bit more of the builders, or if in a time that we want to do a cleanse or a detox for a period of time, we lean more into the plants. But if we cleanse too much, we get washed out. And that's why in the practice, I would sit with women that's been on a purely plant-based diet for 5 years at 35 with osteoporosis, like they washed out, and then we're like, let's just slowly start bringing in the builders, because we need the builders to repair, and the body longs for builders. And I often ask, if your body is an animal as well, what does this animal need? Like we're mammals. So when we start looking at detox, it really is for me about simplifying things, cleaning with the simplest things you can find. I really lean into the essential oils for this a lot, because I find that they're effective cleaners, and they're potent, and they're plants. The plants are cleansers. So
like what
gosh,
is
and then
what
we're
is
talking about
oil?
female.
What do you use to clean your home?
Yeah, so I use lemon essential oil as one of my cornerstone cleaners. It dissolves fats, and it just dissolves things. But I also use rosemary. I use what is it called? Like a complex of oils called On Guard, that has clove and cinnamon and some other orange, like wild orange, and that in it as well. And it it's about dissolving what you've got in the system. And mostly it's the fatty kind of deposit that's hard to dissolve, and then bicarbonate vinegar and borax, and then with I don't want to like start throwing brands out, but I mean, if you start looking at I think the most important thing is to start looking at labels, and reading labels, and just understanding that that the things that are in there aren't without effect on our bodies. Something that's really important for me, and I didn't mention it earlier, is the intergenerational imprint that we have. When we're talking about detoxification, we're talking about metabolic health, but when we start looking at the intergenerational imprinting that we leave on our kids, we must realize that this is an impact that's not just for you that you're doing it for the next generation, and for them for the next generation, because it's it's this idea, and I'm sure you've heard this, that we all were, when we were our mother's womb, for women, our ovaries started forming. And so when you were in your mother's womb, you were exposed already to what was in your grandmother, because your mother was exposed to that. So we're sitting in this place where there's these multiple levels, because your mother's ovaries were formed in your grandmother's, while she was in your grandmother's womb, you were basically exposed to your grandmother's exposures. So it really is this intergenerational effect, and we are seeing it. We're looking at a planet that is struggling with fertility. We're struggling with toxins. We're sitting with unprecedented levels of autoimmunity, cancers, chronic diseases. And we got to just zoom out and see, what are we doing? How disconnected are we from the food that we're eating, from what we're growing? How often do we cook at home? How often do we cook a meal from beginning to end? Do we know where that food is grown? Do we know what that animal ate? What are you supporting with the money that you paying? Are you paying the meat producer that's just doing food lot grown meat, or are you paying the guys that are ensuring their animals are healthy and it's a live, sustainable ecosystem that you're paying into? I think we're sitting in a place with such deep disconnect. And this is why when we start having these conversations, it's about being reminded of ourselves and our own internal cyclical nature, and how we are connected to the external cycles and to nature, that is the absolute teacher of cyclical well-being, and that keeps going, despite what we're doing to it. And just really coming into a place of deep reverence. And if we can do that for ourselves and recognize the incredible magnificence that is our body, and the ability of it to come to a place of health. The body wants to heal. We've got the most wonderful healing machine. It's so subtle and nuanced and well orchestrated, but we've forgotten it. And if we can start remembering this for ourselves, further within, then we can maybe start looking at what we're doing to the earth as well. It's a much bigger conversation than just looking at how much glucose you're getting in a day. It really is about coming into a place of reverence for this planet. There's no planet B. It's like, this is it. And so it's important. It's important work, and it starts at home.
Wow. Well, I think that is so beautiful and so well said. And I think it can seem overwhelming, because as soon as you say, okay, it's not just the carbs, it's so much more than that. It's where we're getting our food, what our food ate, what are we putting on our skin? What are we cleaning our homes with? It feels overwhelming, but I think we can distill it back down to how close is the way we are living across all aspects of the way we are living. How close does it resemble the way we are supposed to live as humans, from, I hate to say, an evolutionary perspective, if you will, or from the perspective of what are we supposed to eat? What are we supposed to be exposed to? What stress levels are we supposed to have? how much outside time are we supposed to have? So I think if you think of it from humans as being part of nature, as being another organism within nature, rather than being separate and above nature, thinking that we can fix everything from our scientific perspectives, and we can control nature, we can control our health via our clever brains. It feels like we, exactly as you've said, we've lost the ancestral, natural knowledge that humans have, and the natural, I don't know, health being our birthright. We think we can do better. We control our cycles with contraceptive pills. We control the germs in our homes with all sorts of chemicals. We put parabens on our skin. We put aluminium under our armpits. We put sun cream with all sorts of things in it on our faces. And I think we don't think. We just don't think. We trust these money-driven companies that make these things, not realizing that they don't actually have any vested interest in our health. They just want the product to smell nice, feel nice, and be bought. So, and I think, I think especially from our parents' generation, the baby boomer generation, there was a very big movement towards a heavy reliance on science and doctors and antibiotics and all these things, which actually are incredible things. And we absolutely, I mean, if you are going to die of a bacterial infection, an antibiotic is life-saving. But then we moved into the era where we just take antibiotics willy-nilly, even for viral infections, and then we wonder why we have gastrointestinal dysbiosis. And so basically what I'm saying is I'm hearing all these things, and I think it resonates so much. And I think if people can take off their tinted glasses and their viewpoints and start thinking of the fact that humans are just organisms like every other animal on the planet, what does that animal need to thrive? And we need to say, what do humans need to thrive? And I think it's beautiful to see it that way. And then also eventually what the planet needs to thrive, which is actually a course that Nutrition Network has in the pipelines as well. So you'll have to watch that space for that training. But we're definitely wanting to dive into sustainable agriculture, all that kind of thing. So that's exciting. But I just want to say that really, really resonated with me. All right.
I want to jump in here. I want to jump in here because there's two things that's come up for me. One of the first things is that we have lost trust in the body. We are in a medical paradigm that is set up for us to arrive at your doctor and ask them, what is wrong with my body? So there's very little listening, very little listening and understanding of our own bodies, and the bodies are speaking the whole time. This is one thing that it's so clear. The body will speak and speak. In fact, it'll whisper first, and then it will speak, and then eventually it will scream, and then it will stop you in your tracks. And often that's when people come to me. But if you listen, when you say, what are we supposed to, it feels like you're supposed to be doing this. And I think if we can, I don't want to point a finger, and I just want to say that because that's what I'm feeling when you say that. And I want to get people into a place where I can say, I want to invite you to start seeing and observing what's happening in your body, seeing what does it feel like when you eat certain foods. For a period of time, cut out caffeine and alcohol and see what your sleep is like. For a period of time, go just with a lower carb veggies and see what you feel like. And it's an ongoing experiment for each one of us. Like how much, feel what you feel when you've gone off grid for a weekend and you didn't look at your cell phone, and what was your sleep and your mood like? Just start paying attention, because the body will let you know without a doubt. And then when we start looking at the medical paradigm that we're in, there's the approach that we're taking is called the pathogenic approach. So when you go to someone, they will start thinking, what is wrong with you? What is the pathology? What is the thing that's causing it? And what drug do we prescribe for this? There is no trust that the body can overcome this, because we can create a resilient body that's able to overcome adversity. And the place that I want to invite people to come to is start looking at the salutogenic. And the salutogenic means the health creating place. So salutogenesis means we build resilience. It means we start giving our kids the correct building blocks so that they start from a healthy foundation. They need fat, they need vitamin A, they need the organ meats, they need enough protein. And then we know we can create a resilient immune system with enough, in terms of building microbiome, getting adequate fiber and making sure some of that's fermented things. So creating, really coming from a place that I'm not coming from I need antibiotics and anti-inflammatories and antidepressants. I want to see, how do I create pro-life? So how do I create a microbial diversity in their gut microbiome, so that I know that we're sitting with an immune system that's resilient, because 75% sits in the gut. And how do I know that I'm giving them the foods that help heal and seal that gut 6 months onwards? Like when we start introducing solids, are we giving the right things, or are we giving rice porridge and these things that just break down and keeps the dysbiosis going? So it really is about shifting into a place of creating resilience, as opposed to sitting in a place where I feel like my body's broken and I need medication to solve it. So falling into a place of stillness and going, okay, the body actually can heal. And what it's saying to me is not when we're sitting with symptoms, it's not that the body is not able to heal. It is the body showing, and it's the way that it's telling, I need help. What I'm getting is not right. What I'm getting is driving imbalance. What I'm getting is driving dis-ease. So coming to a place of gratitude for symptoms, instead of feeling there's something wrong and I'm broken. Poor me.
I love that. That's incredibly positive. I think it brings me to, I just wanted to touch on the thyroid, because you did mention, you mentioned cancers, you mentioned polycystic ovarian syndrome and other things, but I'm feeling like I'm noticing around me that there is a lot of thyroid dysfunction that is happening at these transition periods that you spoke about, which are our challenges as females. So whether that is pregnancy or postpartum, or whether that is perimenopause or menopause, I'm seeing a lot of thyroid dysfunction happen at those time points. Is this an indication of purely a hormonal dysregulation, or is this what's always happened to women throughout the I don't know, centuries? Have women always ended up more likely to have thyroid dysfunction at these turning points? Or is this, in other words, is it just the fact that their hormones are changing? Or is this something that is happening more commonly nowadays? And in which case, why? And why does it happen at those hormonal transitional phases? What's going on?
Yeah. So we can lean into estrogen and progesterone again, and they are, I always say, almost yin yang. Like where estrogen, let's just look at the womb. If we look at estrogen building the endometrial lining up a point where we then ovulate, and then we get progesterone that's released, and progesterone is the counter of that. So it stops it from growing more, it brings the balance. And like that sort of dance that estrogen and progesterone does in the womb, it does elsewhere in the body as well. It's, where estrogen can be make us more insulin sensitive, the progesterone makes us less insulin sensitive. So it really is this impact that it has, specifically then looking at thyroid. Estrogen has a couple of direct actions on the thyroid. It increases our thyroid binding globulin, and thyroid binding globulin is basically the taxi that binds your thyroid hormones and carries it around the body. So when thyroid hormone is bound, it's not free and not available for the body to use. When we are in the first half of our cycle, we have higher thyroid binding globulin, less available thyroid hormone, and we can actually feel a little bit sluggish in that time as a result of this. And estrogen also decreases the conversion, or it slows the conversion of T4 to T3 in terms of our thyroid hormones. And estrogen also increases immune activation, and it increases our autoimmune risk. Progesterone does a lot of the opposite effects. So progesterone boosts and increases the conversion of T4 to T3. Progesterone generally in the body lowers inflammation, makes us feel more grounded, makes us feel more yummy in that like luteal phase. But it also protects the thyroid tissue from autoimmune attack, and it progesterone increases the cellular sensitivity at the cellular level. It increases the sensitivity of the thyroid hormone. So it's this balance thing, right? Now, when we think about what happens in the postpartum period, if you're lucky enough and you're able to breastfeed, the oxytocin and the prolactin that's produced during breastfeeding suppresses the progesterone production. So it's a time where we have quite a lot of unopposed estrogen, combined with disrupted sleep and generally not as good a diet unless you've planned for it and are looking after yourself, plus extra stress of having to care for a newborn and possibly other kids. So it's just a perfect storm that sets us up in that time where we're really vulnerable. And because of the unopposed progesterone, this is the time in postpartum, and then that happens, and then in perimenopause, the first hormone that starts dropping is progesterone, where our estrogen often goes quite haywire, and can have peaks and troughs, and again, the unopposed estrogen in that time sets us up to be more prone to autoimmunity. That's the sort of medical side of it. One thing that I work with and see in the practice, and the kind of typical patient that I would start looking for antibodies, typical profile, not all of it, very often firstborns, very often type A personality, feeling like they are responsible for other people's happiness or other people's well-being. So they stretch themselves beyond their boundaries. When I'm dive a little bit deeper into the psychological side of things, very often they feel things, but they don't say it. So there's this disconnection between the head and the heart, and the suppression of what I actually feel, but I keep doing the right thing because it's the right thing, because I am the good girl. There isn't space for my feelings and emotions. So when I'm sitting in that space, I start asking questions, and I very often uncover that there's more to the story. We end up doing blood testing, and then we find antibodies. So firstly, mainstream GPs do not generally just check for antibodies. It's one of those first things. I screen for it in all women that come to the practice. So we'll do TSH, T3, T4, free T3, 3T4, your thyroglobulin antibodies and your thyroid peroxidase antibodies, sometimes also reverse T3. And so that as a starting point, you'll already start, you'll obviously they get screened in or screened out. And then we look at the amount of gut dysbiosis and leaky gut that is there, that's generally found. You cannot have autoimmunity without leaky gut. They go hand in hand. So what are the things that drive leaky gut? Gut dysbiosis, antibiotic, steroids, most of our pharmaceuticals actually, a lot of the anti-inflammatories, but most of them drive leaky gut either directly from causing gut disruption or disrupting the microbiome. We also, again, intergenerationally, antibiotics was introduced, around 50 years ago. So we are in the second or third generation of people with disrupted gut microbiome, specifically as a result of antibiotics. So we have kids that come in with much less biodiversity and many more eczemas, allergies, so all these things as a result of that. We start looking at all the things that impact the autism spectrum disorders, and just so many more things. Then you add in what we're putting in the diet. I mean, it's such a storm. But now we look at, then on top of that, we've got the xenoestrogens and all the toxins that we spoke about. And one of the big things I have to mention is gluten. So as a result of all the gut dysbiosis and microbial disruption and the leaky gut, we're not able to digest our grains as we were, and our grains have changed. We don't have the einkorn and the emmer. They were these original wheats, and we have genetically modified them to be much shorter. They used to be long, grassy. They're grasses, right? So they used to be these long, grassy plants with kind of short heads and kind of short grains. But now, because if we make the grains bigger, the long grasses will topple over. So we've genetically modified them to be shorter with much bigger heads, but much sturdier. And we also like gluten because it makes things elastic. But that same elasticity and the pliability that we get with the gluten makes that it's very hard to digest. And this is why we sit with the problem of gluten sensitivity. And we're sitting with particularly bad wheat in South Africa. You'll often hear people that can't tolerate gluten, they'll go to Europe and they're able to eat pasta in Italy and have bread in Spain. They've got much stricter laws around genetic modification, around glyphosate spraying. And, also, of course, you're on holiday, so you're not as stressed as you are when you're here. So, there's so much to go into here. But when we look at the thyroid, I think it's, on average, women go for about 8 years without being diagnosed, which is a long time. It's nearly a decade of feeling sluggish, brain fog, weight gain, just knowing something's off. And then the GP looks at their blood and they go, everything's fine. And it's awful because women feel like they're not heard. They think it's in their head, or they're told it's in their head. And that also feeds into not trusting their bodies, because clearly there's nothing wrong, my body's fine. And then they come to me, or they go to someone that's more integrative, and they start looking at a different picture, and there it is. This is like something that can contribute to the 4 or 5 miscarriages, something that can contribute to the way you're feeling, and we can treat, and we can support, and we can reverse. So yeah.
Wow. Well, there is so much, and we're drawing to the end here. So I just wanted to end with something that you said right in the beginning, which I would like to investigate a little bit more. You mentioned that how many carbs we eat, or how much carbs we eat, and how, I think you even mentioned exercise. It seems like that what we need changes depending on whether we're in the follicular phase, before ovulation, or the luteal phase between ovulation and then before your period, that PMS period. You say during the PMS, so-called PMS period, lead up to menstruation, there's an increased need for carbohydrates, but yet there's an increased insulin resistance, ironically, because can you tell us a little bit more about how women should be eating and exercising based on their cycle? And maybe you can even add in a few other things, lifestyle related things, that need to be considered within that cyclical nature of the premenopausal woman, if you will.
Yeah. I want to just correct. I think I wasn't clear in the first, and I said insulin resistance in the first, and it's not right. In the beginning of the cycle, after we've bled, all the hormones have dropped down, and we're sitting with lower estrogen, and it starts to slowly build. But because of that lower estrogen and low progesterone, our blood glucose is much more stable. In fact, I often say to women, you're much more like men in that first half of your cycle. And this is also why you often hear women say, I train with my partner and I feel great, but I'm gaining weight and he's not. But the problem is we're training and we're eating the same throughout the whole cycle. So when we're looking at the menstrual phase and the early follicular phase, all the hormones have dropped low. We're quite glucose stable, and we don't need the carbs. So we can go more with fats and proteins and the lower carb veggies. So you want to do your higher density food in that time. You want to do good proteins. I always say, if you can add in some meat stock, and maybe even bone broth and organ meats in that time. And there's a difference between the two. I'm not going to go into it now because I'm going to get sidetracked, but if you want, we can clarify, but otherwise another time. So in that menstrual phase specifically, keeping things gentle. The body is busy getting rid, it's busy sloughing off. So we want to go feel into your body. Can you allow yourself time to maybe for 3 to 5 days do less? Do some yin yoga, do some gentle walking, maybe just do some stretching, maybe just rest, have a nap. Then in the follicular phase, as the estrogen starts rising, we're not insulin resistant, we're insulin sensitive. So the estrogen increases insulin sensitivity. And this is, I kind of want to just like, can you put a little thing when I'm speaking at the top, just to say with the previous one, because that is I called it incorrectly. We're much more insulin sensitive, so we can actually we can tolerate a bit more carbs, but I still say we don't need it. The body doesn't actually need it at that stage. So we can still go sort of, 20 to 25% of carbs of our total macro portions. And then this is a great time with the estrogen rising that we can start doing muscle building, strength training, HIIT training, and you can really actually push in this time of the follicular phase building up to ovulation. It's your best time to muscle build, to go hard. Like, your recovery will be much better as a result of the estrogen that's higher. Your sleep will be better as a result of higher estrogen and specifically low progesterone. So this is really a great time to push. When we then get into the ovulatory phase, we've got estrogen and luteinizing hormone and a bit of a testosterone peak here. So at this stage, you feel powerful. And there's, alongside each of these, there's also brain changes that happen. So in the ovulation time, you are the most magnetic that you'll be. And I often say to women, can you try and do a talk or a conversation in the time that you're ovulating, because your brain is much more able to do better word recall and your memory is better. So it's the whole system that changes. It's not just the hormones and the womb, it's literally the immune system, the gut, the microbial diversity changes over the cycle. So in that ovulatory phase, when we have the estrogen and luteinizing hormone and the testosterone peak, you feel powerful, and it's a great time to do intense training. And then we start, you can start increasing. If you're training more, you do need a little bit more carbs, but you can also be metabolically flexible, so use some ketones for the repair. And then we go into the luteal phase. And with the luteal phase, progesterone starts increasing. And when we have that increased progesterone, the body biologically responds post-ovulation. Almost, it's primed for if we are possibly conceived. So everything, the threshold for cortisol release is much lower. So stressors will drive cortisol quicker. And remember, cortisol and insulin are both pro-fat storing. Cortisol muscle building. Cortisol actually will drive even muscle breakdown. And we can start gaining central and upper arm weight as a result of cortisol. And the progesterone and the lower, relative to progesterone, lower estrogen make us less insulin sensitive in this time. So this is the time that we really want to listen to the body. And if we're craving carbs, firstly, make sure that you're having proteins and fat for breakfast, because the body will also crave until we've met our protein satiety for the day. But you want to make sure that you're nourishing the body with adequate carbs, but also then diversity, slightly higher carbohydrate veggies, some higher carb veggies at night is nice. Half quarter sweet potato, but then that with your lower carb veggies combined. And then you want to, in the first week, I'd say, of luteal phase, you can still train, but then in the week before your menstrual cycle, if you can allow yourself to rest and just start bringing down some of the exercise intensity, you will not believe how you start building muscle over time. Because often what happens, if we're building a lot in the follicular phase and we keep at that same pace and frequency in the luteal phase, we often undo a lot that we did in the first half, because it drives the female physiology experiences exercise as stress in that second half of the cycle. So it literally counters what we did in the first half. And when these women come to me that's been saying, I've been training with my partner and I'm gaining weight and he's losing weight, when they start allowing themselves to rest in the second half of the cycle, it changes for them. So it really is an incredibly powerful place to come into, of recognizing that the needs change over the cycle. I need to listen to this, and I want to listen to this, because this is what the female physiology needs. And when we start listening to this, so many things shift. Because there's often women, there's this, men have a 24-hour cycle. And for them, testosterone peak in the morning, but testosterone's really like the main driver for them. And that's their circadian rhythm is a 24-hour rhythm. So for us, we have the 24-hour rhythm, but then plus the 28-day rhythm, infradian rhythm over that. And perimenopause and menopause, we start returning to the 24-hour. But there's so much, and I hear this so often in the practice about women feeling like they are. There's shame and there's guilt around not exercising, or there's shame and guilt around not going to the gym because it's right for you, it's good for you. We're so it's so drummed into us, this patriarchal, masculine, not patriarchal, the masculine way of doing. And I really want to gently invite women just to try it for 3 months. The hormones take about 120 days to shift. So 100 to 120, 3 cycles. Do it for 3 cycles and see what you feel like. Just do it. Like, what's there to lose, and if it doesn't work, then go back to your other ways, but just give it a shot. And I think the people to lean into here really is Alissa Vitti is the one that mentioned it first. I learned about infradian rhythm from her book In the Flow. And then of course Mindy Peltz also speaks about the sort of, when is the safe ways to fast. I'm very, very, very careful to recommend fasting, especially for women in their reproductive years, even if you're not planning to reproduce, because fasting, food signals safety to the female physiology, and if we don't signal that safety, it's a stressor. And I get these women that do OMAD, so 1 meal a day for months on end, and they're sitting with severe insulin resistance and they don't understand. It's because they're driving their cortisol up as a result of stress. And there's other things usually as well, but it's a good place to start looking at female physiology feels safe when it's got good food. Yeah.
Wow. Dr. Lyell, this has been the most empowering and enlightening conversation. I think, you've reframed the way we look at the entire female lifespan and hormones to like looking through a lens of listening to our female physiologies, eradicating the shame and guilt and finger pointing, and focusing on positivity and empowerment and possibility even, and I think it's just so incredibly beautiful to kind of tap into our innate wisdom, if you will, and start listening to our bodies. I think it's just that alone is incredibly powerful, not to mention all the other amazing information that you have given us over the course of this wonderful interview. Before we sign off, because we do have to go, unfortunately, everybody, but Dr. Lyell, are there any last words that you would like to leave us or the audience with?
The only thing that's coming up for me is I want to invite women to sit back into their hip bones and just actually be and kind of still, even if it's for 10 seconds, and just know that their body's got them. Like really just in your bones, your body has you, and it's your like the innate wisdom that you mentioned is so lovely, because it really does. The body has such innate wisdom. And can you trust that wherever you are and whatever you're experiencing in your body is exactly where you're meant to be? Your body is not broken. Your body is wise, and it's trying to remind you, and it's trying to call you back to remembrance. And can you really just start listening and ask questions and find if the practitioner that you're with is not giving, if you're not getting resolution and you're not finding answers, keep looking, Google it, ChatGPT it, like do what you need to do. People often say to me so embarrassingly, ChatGPT this, and I'm like, thank you, I want you to know more about your condition than I do, because it's your body and it's your birthright and you need to find this out. So I really want to encourage women to advocate for themselves and to not turn their back on their body. Their body is not, the problem is not the body. It's really just communicating, and the feelings and the symptoms is the way that it's communicating. So thank you. This was so delightful. And I really hope that someone listens to this and a path changes, something sparks them and they feel excited and they can go, my body's got me. This is really cool. Yeah.
I have absolutely no doubt that they absolutely will. If people want to find you, Dr. Lyell, where do they find you?
Instagram on Dr. Daphne Lyell. Maybe we can put that in show notes or something. And then I've got a website, also just drdaphnelyell.co.za. Reach out to me via email, bookings at Dr. Daphne Lyell, or just go to the website and they can find me through there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dr. Lyell. For those of you who want to watch Dr. Lyell's entire 2-part lecture within the menopause and perimenopause training, please sign up for the Metabolic Mastery for Women bundle, which is on special for this Black Friday, including 3 of our courses. In fact, what we discussed today was, it just touched on one tiny aspect, that her giant lecture actually contains very little of what we discussed today. So you will be getting a huge amount. Roshni says this was such an incredible session, great strategies, powerful message of gratitude for your body. It's not broken. Understanding the symptoms, taking proper steps. Thank you, Roshni. That's a very good summary of today's discussion. So thank you, Roshni, and the rest of the audience for joining us. And a special thank you to Dr. Lyell. And we will see our audience at the next live. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Tamsin.